There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a room when a liar realizes they have been caught. It is not a sudden quiet. It is a heavy, suffocating stillness, like all the air has been sucked out of the space. I know this silence well because I was the one who brought it into the room. For 5 long years, I had poured my heart, my soul, and every ounce of my fading inheritance into a single creation. I was a master perfumer, or at least I was trying to be. My family had once owned the most respected fragrance house in the country, but after my father passed away, we were left with nothing but crippling debt and an old, dusty laboratory. I was desperate to save our legacy. Enter Victor. Victor was charming, brilliant, and 10 years my senior. He was a rising star in the luxury corporate world, a man who knew how to market an idea and sell it for millions. When we met, he promised to help me rebuild my family's empire. He became my mentor, my business partner, and eventually the man I was going to marry. I trusted him completely. I gave him the keys to my laboratory, the deeds to the property, and the deepest secrets of my father's journals. Together, we were going to create a masterpiece, a fragrance so unique, so intoxicating that it would change the industry forever. I spent thousands of hours locked in that laboratory. I suffered through chemical burns, sleepless nights, and the crushing weight of expectation. I was blending rare orchids from the mountains of South America with aged amber and deep, smoky woods. It was a delicate, nearly impossible balance. One wrong drop and the entire batch was ruined. But Victor was always there, standing behind me, rubbing my shoulders, whispering words of encouragement. He told me that this perfume would secure our future. He told me that as soon as the formula was perfected, we would launch our own company, get married, and leave our financial struggles behind forever. I was blinded by love and exhausted by ambition. I did not notice the subtle changes in his behavior. I did not question why he insisted that all the legal paperwork for the laboratory, the patents, and the sourcing contracts be put entirely in his name. He told me it was to protect me from the debt collectors who were still hounding my family. He said he was shielding me, taking on the legal risks so I could focus entirely on the art of the scent. I believed him. I thought he was my savior. I did not realize he was just waiting for me to finish the work so he could steal my life. The breakthrough finally happened on a cold Tuesday night in November. I had found the perfect balance. The fragrance was dark, elegant, and completely unforgettable. I named it Midnight Orchid. I remember running out of the lab, tears streaming down my face, holding the small glass vial like it was a newborn child. I called Victor immediately. I told him we had done it. The masterpiece was complete. He rushed over, smelled the vial, and smiled a smile I will never forget. It was not a smile of shared victory. It was the smile of a man who had just won the lottery. The next morning, I arrived at the laboratory to find the locks had been changed. My security card did not work. I knocked on the glass door, confused, thinking there had been some sort of mechanical error. A security guard I had never seen before stepped out and handed me a cardboard box. Inside were my personal coffee mug, a few family photos, and a typed letter. The letter was on the letterhead of Orlia, the largest and most ruthless luxury conglomerate in the world. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the words. The letter stated that my services as a freelance contractor were no longer required. It stated that all intellectual property developed on the premises belonged exclusively to Victor, and that he had just signed a $20 million exclusive contract with Orlia to launch Midnight Orchid as his own signature creation. As a bonus, he had been appointed as their new global creative director. I called him, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. He answered on the second ring. His voice was cold, completely void of the warmth I had known for 5 years. He told me to grow up. He said business was a brutal game and I was simply too naive to play it. When I screamed that he was a fraud, that he had stolen my life's work and my father's legacy, he simply laughed. He reminded me that my name was on absolutely nothing. Legally, I was just a lab assistant who had been let go. If I tried to sue him, Orlia's army of lawyers would bury me in court fees until I was completely bankrupt. Then he hung up. He did not just take my perfume. He took my future, my dignity, and my trust. I sat on the pavement outside my own laboratory and cried until I had no tears left. He thought he had destroyed me. He thought I was weak. For 2 weeks, I barely left my bed. The world moved on without me. Every time I opened the internet, I saw Victor's face. He was on the cover of magazines, posing in perfectly tailored suits, giving interviews about his genius process in creating Midnight Orchid. He talked about his sleepless nights, his inspiration, his profound connection to the ingredients. Every word he spoke was a lie stolen directly from my mouth. He was preparing for the grandest launch event the industry had ever seen, set to take place exactly 3 months from the day he locked me out. But as the initial shock wore off, the crushing sadness slowly turned into something else. It turned into a cold, sharp, and intensely focused anger. I stopped crying. I got out of bed, went to my desk, and opened my private notebooks. Victor had stolen the formula from the central computer in the lab. He had taken the physical batches we had already mixed. He had all the supplier contacts, but Victor was a marketer, not a chemist. He did not understand the deep, cellular biology of what I had created. The midnight orchid was a highly volatile mixture. The rare orchids I used contained natural enzymes that aggressively broke down other essential oils over time. In my private notebook, I had documented a terrible failure. During the testing phase, I discovered that after exactly 90 days of being sealed in a bottle, the chemical structure of the perfume collapsed. It did not just fade, it mutated. The sweet, dark floral notes rotted, turning into a foul, stomach-churning stench that smelled like sour milk and decaying wood. To prevent this, I had invented a stabilizing agent, a final crucial step in the process that neutralized the enzymes. I called it Step 0. It was a secret I kept entirely in my own head, waiting to add it to the official computer records only after the final contracts were signed. Victor had locked me out before I could update the digital files. He had stolen the unstable formula. He was mass-producing a chemical time bomb. I realized I did not need a lawyer to destroy him. I just needed to let him destroy himself. He was producing hundreds of thousands of bottles, shipping them to high-end boutiques around the world, all scheduled to be unsealed on the day of his massive global launch, exactly 90 days after he stole the formula. My revenge was not going to be a quiet lawsuit. It was going to be a global catastrophe. While Victor spent millions of dollars of corporate money throwing lavish parties and flying around the world to promote his stolen genius, I went quietly to work. I had to ensure that when his empire fell, I was ready to step into the void and reclaim my legacy. I sold the last piece of jewelry I owned, my grandmother's wedding ring, to rent a tiny cheap workspace in an industrial district. It was dirty and cold, but it was all I needed. I sourced the ingredients again, this time using different, quiet channels. I rebuilt the midnight orchid, but this time I added Step 0. I perfected the true formula, the stable formula, the one that would last forever. I poured the golden liquid into simple, elegant bottles and labeled them with a single word: truth. I did not have millions of dollars for marketing, but I had something better. I had the industry's deepest secret. For years, Victor had hidden a fatal flaw from his corporate bosses. His sense of smell was slowly failing due to a rare nerve condition. He had relied entirely on my nose during our partnership, hiding behind my talent to maintain his status. He literally could not tell the difference between a masterwork and a mediocre blend anymore, which is why he never noticed the missing stabilizing agent in his stolen batches. I began sending small, anonymous packages to the top fragrance critics and luxury influencers in the world. I included a sample of truth along with a cryptic typed note. The note said, "A fraud is about to be exposed. When the midnight bell tolls, the fake orchid will rot, but the truth will remain. Do not trust the label, trust your senses." The critics were intrigued. The quality of my anonymous perfume was undeniable, and the mystery surrounding it sparked a wave of whispers in the high society circles. They did not know who was behind it, but they were listening. Meanwhile, Victor was completely blind to the trap closing around him. He was too arrogant, too high on his own stolen success to notice the warning signs. I watched his televised press conferences with a calm, steady heartbeat. I watched him smile his $1,000,000 smile. I counted down the days on my calendar: 10 days left, 5 days left, 1 day left. The night of the global launch was a spectacle of wealth and excess. Orly had rented out a historic palace in the center of the city. There were thousands of guests, celebrities, royalty, industry titans, and every major critic in the world. The room was dripping in black velvet and gold lighting. Massive glass chandeliers hung from the ceiling, illuminating the thousands of sleek, black bottles of midnight orchid arranged on towering crystal displays. I bought a ticket to the gala using a fake name, dressing in a simple black gown and slipping quietly through the crowd. I stood in the shadows near the back of the grand ballroom, watching as Victor took the stage. He looked incredibly handsome, radiating the confidence of a man who believed he had conquered the world. The crowd silenced as he stepped up to the microphone. He gave a soaring, emotional speech about his solitary journey as an artist. He spoke about his struggles, his late nights in the lab, and how this perfume was a reflection of his own soul. It made me sick to my stomach to hear my struggles spoken in his voice. Finally, the moment arrived. He signaled for the waitstaff to begin moving through the crowd, handing out the freshly unsealed bottles to the critics and VIPs for the official first spray. The count was exactly 90 days. The enzymes had finished their silent work in the darkness of the bottles. Victor raised his own bottle to the crowd. He closed his eyes and sprayed it onto his wrist, inhaling deeply. Because of his failing senses, he smiled, smelling nothing but his own ego. But the rest of the room was a different story. As hundreds of guests pressed the nozzles, releasing the fragrance into the warm air of the ballroom, a wave of sheer, unadulterated horror swept through the crowd. It started as a murmur of confusion. Women began coughing, covering their noses with delicate silk handkerchiefs. Men stepped back, their faces twisting in disgust. The smell was overpowering. It was the scent of rancid decay, rotting cabbage, and sharp, stinging vinegar. It clung to their expensive clothes and skin, burning their nostrils. Panic began to ripple through the palace. A famous actress near the front row actually gagged, dropping her bottle onto the marble floor where it shattered, making the stench even worse. Victor opened his eyes, confused by the chaos. He looked out at the sea of disgusted faces. People were backing away from the displays, demanding water, rushing toward the exits to escape the suffocating foulness that had taken over the room. I stepped out of the shadows and walked slowly down the center aisle. The crowd parted for me, too busy fleeing the smell to notice who I was, but Victor noticed. His eyes locked onto mine and the color completely drained from his face. He gripped the edges of the podium, his knuckles turning white. He knew in that split second that I had done something, he just did not understand how. I reached the front of the stage, standing right below him. I pulled a simple glass bottle from my purse, the bottle labeled Truth. I sprayed it into the air. Instantly, the divine, intoxicating scent of the real midnight orchid cut through the foulness in the immediate area. It was clean, dark, and perfect. The critics who were covering their faces suddenly paused, turning their heads toward me, their trained noses recognizing the absolute perfection of the true formula. I looked up at Victor and spoke clearly, making sure the microphones on the stage picked up my voice for the entire room to hear. I told him he should have checked the chemistry before he stole my life. I announced to the room that the man on the stage was a fraud. I revealed that he had stolen my incomplete formula, pushed me out of my own laboratory, and mass-produced a defective product. Then I delivered the final, fatal blow. I revealed his medical secret. I told the crowd that the so-called genius global creative director could not even smell his own rotting perfume. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a man's entire life ending in real time. The CEO of Aurelia, sitting in the front row, stood up, his face red with fury, and ordered security to shut down the event. The media cameras turned from the displays and focused entirely on Victor, capturing his humiliated, ruined expression as he realized he was finished. By the next morning, the scandal had broken worldwide. Aurelia faced the biggest public relations disaster in luxury history. They were forced to recall hundreds of thousands of ruined bottles, costing them tens of millions of dollars. Victor was fired instantly, stripped of his title, and blacklisted from the industry forever. He tried to claim I sabotaged him, but my original time-stamped journals proved the formula was always mine, and that he had stolen it prematurely. Aurelia, desperate to save face and salvage the massive investment they had already made in the marketing campaign, came crawling to me. They offered me an unprecedented contract. I demanded full creative control, the return of my family's laboratory, and the majority percentage of all profits. They had no choice but to agree. I rebuilt my family's legacy not through a loud, messy fight, but through patience and absolute precision. Victor thought he could step on me to reach the top. But he forgot one very important rule. When you steal someone else's foundation to build your castle, you should make sure you know exactly how it was built. Because the person who laid the bricks also knows exactly how to tear them down.